in Mago Reddit. Today's story is
My college sister-in-law lived for free in our house with our newborn until we found out what she was doing in the basement at 3 a.m. Her real motive left us frozen. Last month, my husband's younger sister decided to move in with us. She is studying at university, and instead of staying in a student residence like most students, she decided that that kind of life was not right for her. She felt that the environment did not meet her needs. So she made the decision to look for accommodation off campus. The problem is that rents are very expensive, and it was difficult for her to pay for a place by herself. Nor did she want to share a house with strangers. That's when she approached us for help. She explained how living with us would allow her to save on rent and everyday expenses. She asked us if we would agree to her staying temporarily until she could make new friends and move in with them. My husband accepted immediately without thinking twice, but I had certain doubts. The reason for my concern was that I had just had a baby barely 2 months ago. As you can imagine, the whole pregnancy and the experience of giving birth have been quite overwhelming. Now that we have a newborn, taking care of him has not been easy at all. Although my husband helps a lot at home, he is also the one currently working. I am still on maternity leave, and I am not only taking care of the baby, but also doing all the housework. The situation is already quite complicated, and adding another person could make it even more difficult. My newborn is a very demanding baby. He cries frequently, and sometimes wakes up at odd times during the night. He also sleeps very lightly, so any small noise will wake him up, making it even more difficult to get a good night's sleep. My husband and I have tried everything to help him establish a better sleep pattern, and we really hope that the stage will pass soon, and that he will eventually be able to sleep peacefully through the night. But for now, it's still a constant struggle. On top of that, it's been really difficult for me to keep up with the housework. I'm always so exhausted from looking after the baby that I barely have the energy to do anything else. The dishes pile up quickly, and the laundry seems endless. There's always something that needs doing, but I just don't have the strength to keep up with everything. So when the idea of my sister-in-law moving in came up, I couldn't help but feel insecure. With everything I was already handling, I wasn't sure if I could deal with another person in the house. To make sure everyone understood the expectations, I talked to my in-laws and my sister-in-law about the situation. I explained that if she moved in, she would have to occupy the basement and would be responsible for cooking and cleaning for herself because I simply couldn't take care of those tasks at the moment. At that point, my sister-in-law seemed to agree with everything, so I accepted her move. At first, things seemed to go well. She mostly kept to herself and respected the agreement, but over time I noticed that her attitude began to change. For example, during dinner, my sister-in-law frequently commented that I should improve my cooking because she always found something wrong with my meals. My husband never complains, but his sister constantly has something to criticize. She also told me that I should probably ask her mother and my mother-in-law about one of her favorite meals so that I could prepare it especially for her. I found it quite strange. She didn't like my cooking, and on top of that, she wanted me to prepare her favorite dish. I declined politely. I explained that she was welcome to cook whatever she liked if she didn't like what I served. I told her that I was also very busy and was trying to prepare specific meals just for her. She looked at me disappointed, but didn't insist any further. Besides, she constantly hogged the TV all day long instead of attending her classes. For me, watching reality TV while I'm folding clothes or cooking is one of the few ways I can relax and have some entertainment since I gave birth, but she likes to watch other programs, and although she could easily watch them on her tablet in her own room, she insists on using the TV and ends up taking over the living room all day. This leaves me no space to enjoy anything. To make matters worse, she leaves a big mess around her. I found chocolate wrappers on the floor, empty bags of crisps, and other rubbish lying around. I tried to mention it to her, but she replies saying that she never used to clean when she lived at home and that she is still learning. I tried to be understanding and cut her some slack as she is still young and learning to take care of herself. But it's starting to feel like I'm the only one doing all the cleaning, and it's wearing me out. I've been cleaning up after her as much as I can, but it's getting exhausting. Last week I decided to check her room in the basement while she was out and was completely shocked when I saw how dirty it had become. Before she moved in, we had renovated and cleaned the basement so that it was spotless. We had gotten her a new bed and a wardrobe, but now there were stains and dirt everywhere. It was hard to believe that she had allowed her space to become so messy. I really thought she had been cleaning up after herself, but clearly she hadn't. I can't stand being in dirty spaces, so I was tempted to clean it up. But then I reminded myself that she is an adult now and needs to start taking responsibility for her own space. So I decided not to clean it. If that wasn't enough, she doesn't do her own laundry either. She constantly leaves her dirty clothes in a basket, waiting for me to take care of them. She tried to do her own laundry a couple of times, but apparently didn't know how to sort it properly. She mixed all the clothes together, and all her clothes came out dyed different colors. Since then, she has simply let the clothes pile up and expects me to wash them for her. It's frustrating because I'm already doing so much, and she doesn't seem to be making any effort to take care of herself. So, overall, my sister-in-law has been a terrible houseguest. Despite everything she has done, I have kept my mouth shut and tried not to cause problems. I kept reminding myself that this situation was temporary, so it wasn't something I had to deal with for long. My husband has also noticed the problems and has been helping a lot. He has tried to talk to his sister and encourage her to be more collaborative in the house, but things haven't really changed. Then yesterday I got a call from my in-laws. They sometimes call to check up on us, so I thought it would be just another casual conversation. However, this time my mother-in-law started telling me that my sister-in-law had been complaining to her for several days that she wasn't getting enough sleep at her house. Apparently, our baby cried a lot at night, and this had started to affect her sleep. My mother-in-law went on to say that her daughter needs a full 8 or 9 hours of sleep to feel fresh and ready for the day, and she was worried that we were depriving her of that. I tried to explain to my mother-in-law that although I completely understood her concern, it's not like I was intentionally waking the baby up to annoy her. This is just what babies do. They wake up in the middle of the night. I told her that my sister-in-law was staying in the basement while my baby and I were on the second floor, so the noise she could hear would be very faint. I even suggested that I could buy her some earplugs to help her sleep better. However, my father-in-law intervened and argued that it wasn't just about the night. He said that my sister-in-law was also exhausted during the day due to too many disturbances in our house, which was also a concern for them. In fact, I laughed incredulously. My sister-in-law literally spent most of her days lying on our sofa watching TV. In fact, she would often fall asleep right there in the afternoon after lunch, just lazing around while I was running around taking care of everything. So where was this exhaustion I was supposedly feeling coming from? It didn't make any sense to me. All I'm trying to do is look after my baby, and now I have to worry about making sure my sister-in-law is comfortable too. I felt like I was being blamed for something I had no control over, and I was starting to feel really frustrated. I couldn't help myself, so I told my father-in-law how we were doing everything we could to make his daughter comfortable. I made it clear that if she wasn't happy with us, she would always be welcome to find another place to stay in the city. After all, we were letting her live here rent-free. And if she had so many complaints, she really should consider living elsewhere. This did not go down well with my in-laws. They seemed quite offended by my response. My mother-in-law immediately started to defend my sister-in-law, saying that apart from these small complaints, she was actually happy living with us. My mother-in-law told me that we were a family, so we needed to compromise on some things so that everyone could live together. It was then that she suggested something that took me completely by surprise. She said that she and my father-in-law would be willing to pay for me to send my newborn baby to a nursery so that my sister-in-law could have a nice day off and get a good rest during the day. I was completely stunned, and for a moment I thought that maybe I had misheard them. They weren't suggesting that I leave my newborn baby in a nursery just so that their precious daughter wouldn't be disturbed by any noise during the day. It was honestly hard to process. Here I was trying to take care of my baby while dealing with all the stress of running the household. And now they wanted me to put my newborn in a nursery just to make sure my sister-in-law could have some peace and quiet. I couldn't believe it. I felt so bad. I was speechless for a moment. It was as if they were completely ignoring the needs of our family, the needs of my baby, and everything I was going through. All just to make sure their daughter was comfortable. I'm not leaving my newborn baby in a nursery just because your daughter is complaining, I argued, raising my voice. How can you suggest something so ridiculous? I was furious. I had just given birth, And here they were asking me to put my baby in a nursery just to accommodate their daughter's complaints. It seemed completely unreasonable and unfair. They were lucky that we even agreed to take their daughter in the first place. I continued trying to keep my composure, but the anger was about to boil over. But no, they want us to adjust everything for her. Absolutely not. I could tell that my words struck a chord. My in-laws tried to argue more, but it only made me more annoyed. They kept insisting that what they were asking of me was not unreasonable at all. They said I needed to calm down and take some time to think things through. How could I calm down when they were completely ignoring what was important to me? This was our house. My first priority was to take care of my baby, not my sister-in-law, who was a grown woman and needed to take responsibility for herself. My father-in-law told me that if things were too much for us to handle, they would be willing to start sending some money to help with my sister-in-law's shopping and other expenses. Until now, my husband and I hadn't asked them for a penny. We had been paying all their expenses. No questions asked. Money was not an issue for us. I felt that they were trying to brush aside the bigger problem, which was the lack of respect and understanding for what I was going through. I was overwhelmed, exhausted, and already doing more than enough. The last thing I needed was to be asked for more commitments that would only benefit their daughter. It was all too much to take in. I couldn't help feeling that they were completely out of touch with what was really going on in our house. So, am I the bad guy for getting angry at my in-laws' suggestion? Update 1. When I told my husband what his parents had suggested to me, he was just as upset as I was. He couldn't believe they had had the audacity to say such things to me. Without wasting any time, he called them immediately and started arguing with them. I could hear the anger in his voice when he spoke. He was standing up for me, and he wasn't going to tolerate any of that. He told them that after even suggesting that I should leave our newborn baby in a nursery just so that his sister could get some sleep. "Don't forget you're talking about your grandson," he said, his voice cutting. "Do you want us to leave our son in a nursery so that my sister can get some sleep? That lazy girl sleeps all day and skips her classes. Believe me, she sleeps more than enough." I felt as if a great weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Having my husband defend our family like that. He wasn't going to allow his parents to make ridiculous demands of us. And he made sure they knew he wouldn't tolerate it. He was as frustrated with the whole situation as I was, and it meant a lot to me that he was so vocal in defending our family. But it didn't end there. My sister-in-law has also started acting as if she has every right to complain about us. In fact, she came to us with a list of complaints saying that she felt we hadn't been doing enough for her. She actually told my husband and I that we should be better hosts by cooking for her and cleaning up after her, just like her parents did for her. She said all this while staring at me, which made it even more frustrating. I could tell she was deliberately trying to make me feel like I wasn't pulling my weight, like I should leave my newborn and look after her instead. My husband wasn't having any of it. He was firm and direct with her. He told her straight that she was an adult and at university, and if she needed someone to clean up after her and cook for her, she could hire a maid or go back to her mommy. None of us were going to take responsibility for treating her like a child. "We're not ready to take on another baby," he said, making it clear that we had enough with our real baby and everything else. My sister-in-law didn't take it well. She started crying and clearly trying to play the victim. She argued that she wasn't asking for too much and that she was family. She wanted us to feel guilty for not doing more for her. It was clear that she was trying to manipulate the situation by playing the family card, but my husband was not moved by her tears. He stood his ground, and I was relieved to know that we were both on the same page. It was as if we were finally standing up for ourselves and our family, and it felt empowering even though the whole situation was exhausting. Honestly, I am so angry with my sister-in-law at the moment that I am seriously considering asking her to leave. I am at my limit. What is the point of her living with us if all she is doing is creating unnecessary drama in the family? It seems like all the stress and tension has been building up because of her, and I am simply fed up. If we hadn't agreed to help her, I would never have been dragged into these arguments with my in-laws. I could have concentrated on my baby and my own life without all this additional chaos. It's frustrating because we didn't ask for any of this. I also want to make it clear that my in-laws are not exactly bad people. They have never tried to control me or cause problems in my life before all this. They have always been kind and supportive in the past, but this situation with my sister-in-law is totally different. It is unique and is only happening because of her behavior. She goes and complains unnecessarily to them. My in-laws don't seem to understand how easy she has it living with us. They don't seem to see how much we have been sacrificing to help her. Instead of being grateful, she is complaining about things that don't make sense, and it is honestly very frustrating. My sister-in-law literally has a roof over her head, free food, and no rent to pay. She has the luxury of not worrying about these things, but she still feels the need to act as if she is being treated unfairly. I try to be patient, but at this point it's starting to feel like she's taking advantage of our kindness and putting a strain on my relationship with my in-laws. I'm exhausted from all the drama she's causing, and I really don't know how much more I can take. Update 2. Well, my sister-in-law really crossed the line this time. It happened last night, and I'm still trying to process it. In the middle of the night, my husband and I were suddenly woken up by loud noises coming from the basement. At first, we were both so confused and disoriented that it took us a moment to really understand what was happening. Then we realized that my sister-in-law was having a party in the basement. The thing is, she hadn't even bothered to tell us she was having guests. She didn't ask our permission. She didn't give us any warning, nothing. The music was playing so loud we were afraid it would wake our baby. We were furious. I mean, how could she do this without even thinking about the fact that we have a newborn in the house? My husband and I couldn't take it anymore, so we ran down to the basement to confront her. What we saw there was shocking. She was hanging out with 5 other people, and they were all clearly drunk and high. The place was completely trashed. There were used condoms on the floor, and it was disgusting to even look at. I couldn't believe that all of this was happening in our house. My husband was absolutely furious. He started to shout at them to leave, and rightly so. We didn't even know these people. They were complete strangers who had been brought to our house in the middle of the night without any permission, and with a newborn baby in the house, no less. We didn't know who they were, or if they were safe to be around. They could have been dangerous for all we knew. My sister-in-law, clearly high on drugs, started laughing as if it was all a joke. She told us to relax as if nothing was wrong. Her friends were rushing to leave because my husband had threatened to call the police if they didn't. It was as if he didn't even take the situation seriously. I was furious too. I told her to turn the music down immediately. I explained that the noise might wake the baby, but she just laughed at me and then said, "It's always about the baby these days. Don't do this, don't do that. Nobody thinks about me since that baby came into our lives. You and my brother are no fun anymore." I looked at her in disbelief. It was then that it all really clicked for me. I finally realized what the real problem was. My sister-in-law was jealous of our baby. It hit me like a ton of bricks. You see, before we had our baby, my sister-in-law was the youngest in the family. She was the one who always received all the attention and affection, and my husband and I were always there for her. We are much older than her, so we have always treated her like a princess. Every time she visited us, we showered her with attention and took care of her without complaint. I guess that's why she wanted to live with us in the first place. She thought she could continue to receive the same treatment. But things have changed now. My husband and I have become parents. Our priorities are different now. Our baby is our world, and everything revolves around him. That's what it's like when you're a parent. Our lives are no longer about having fun and being carefree like we used to be, and I think my sister-in-law just can't handle that. She's not used to not being the center of attention, and I think it bothers her that she doesn't get the same level of attention as she used to, and that's why she's been complaining about us to her parents. I guess that's also why she wanted us to send our baby to daycare, so she could spend more time with us. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law kept telling my husband and me how she wished things could have stayed the same and how we would never have treated her this way if the baby hadn't been born. Hearing this, I told her straight that she was being childish and immature. She was an adult, and it was time she started taking responsibility for herself. We were not her parents or her carers. I was not going to compromise my son's well-being just to make her feel better. I could see now that this living arrangement was never going to work. It was causing too much tension and too many problems. So I told her that she needed to move out. I made it clear that the situation was not working for anyone and that she had to find somewhere else to stay. Fortunately, my husband agreed with me. He supported my decision, and told his sister she had 1 week to pack up and leave. If she didn't, we would pack up her things and leave them on the curb. At that point, we had had enough. We couldn't continue to allow her to disrespect our space and our family. I was tired of trying to make it work. It was time for her to leave. My sister-in-law started shouting and yelling at us, calling us selfish for throwing her out. She kept repeating over and over again that she had nowhere to go and that we had no right to ask her to leave like that. She was furious. It seemed as if she was trying to make us feel guilty so that we would change our minds. But my husband, who had been more than patient up to that point, had had enough. His response was sharp and straight to the point. Last time I checked, this is our house. So yes, my wife and I can throw you out whenever we want. There is no rental contract to protect you. Go and cry to Mom and Dad. But we're fed up with you. It was hard to hear her scream. But at that point, we both knew we could no longer tolerate her behavior. She had crossed all the lines, and it was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. We had tried to be patient. We had tried to be understanding, but it wasn't working. She was taking advantage of our kindness and our home, and we just couldn't tolerate it anymore. Since then, my in-laws have been contacting us nonstop, begging us not to go ahead with our decision. They have been calling, texting, and trying to persuade us to back down. My mother-in-law thinks we are being too hard on her poor daughter, and my father-in-law is asking if we could at least give her 2 months to find somewhere else to live. They don't understand why we can't just give her more time to sort things out. They are both acting as if we are being unreasonable for wanting her to leave. But the truth is that my husband and I are not giving in. We have given him enough chances, and we are tired of being manipulated. It's really difficult because we never expected it to come to this. We didn't want to create so much tension between us and my in-laws, but at the end of the day, we have to stand up for our family. We have a baby now. We can't let anyone disturb the peace in our home. I know it's hard for my in-laws to see it from our perspective, but we have to do what's best for us. And right now, that means standing by our decision, no matter how much pressure they try to put on us. Update 3. As some of you might have predicted, my sister-in-law didn't leave even after the week we gave her. She completely ignored the deadline, so we had no choice but to take action. My husband and I packed all her things in several boxes and put them on the sidewalk, just as we had told her. We didn't want to do it, but by that point, we had made it clear that she needed to move out, and she wasn't respecting that. When my sister-in-law returned and saw her belongings in the street, she completely lost it. She was furious and started screaming and banging on our door in frustration. You could tell she was beyond upset, but honestly, we couldn't feel sorry for her. She had been given enough chances and had disrespected every one of our boundaries. To make matters worse, 1 or 2 of her boxes had even been stolen while they were sitting outside. Of course, she was even more upset about that, but at this point, I just couldn't feel sorry for her. She was banging on the door, pleading, saying that she had nowhere to go and that she was basically homeless. It was hard to hear, but we stood our ground. We told her we'd give her some money to stay in a hotel for a few days, just to give her some time to sort things out. But after that, she'd be on her own. Just to clarify, her parents are willing to pay for her dorm room, and there are lots of people at the university looking for roommates. All my sister-in-law needed to do was find a place, and her parents would pay for it. But she was lazy and clearly thought we weren't serious about kicking her out. I know it was hard to get her stuff out, but it was the only way we could make her understand that we weren't going to tolerate her behavior anymore. Of course, my sister-in-law didn't stop there. She immediately called my in-laws and begged them to intervene, hoping they could convince us to let her come back, or at least give her more time. But at that point, my husband and I were done. We didn't want to listen anymore. We even refused to take her calls. We knew they would try to make us feel guilty so that we would change our minds, but we had already made our decision. We couldn't back down now. In the end, my husband gave my sister-in-law some money, and she had no choice but to reluctantly call an Uber. Then she packed the few remaining boxes and left our house. It was a difficult moment to witness, but honestly, we had been more than patient with her. And now it was time for her to grow up and live on her own. Although I feel a little sad that it had to come to this, I also feel a huge relief that she is finally gone. There was so much tension in the house when she was here, and now that she's gone, I feel like a weight has been lifted. We can finally get back to our normal routine without all the stress and constant clutter. There is still a lot of work to be done, especially with redecorating and cleaning the basement where she had been living. But now that she's gone, I feel like everything is much more manageable. I have a lot less to worry about every day. I no longer have to clean up after her or deal with constant drama. I can finally focus on what really matters, taking care of my baby and getting our home back to the way it should be.